Flame and Shadow, Chapter 1.
This could be the day. My small body trembled with excitement, mingled with fear, as I finished buttoning up my plain white blouse. Everything absolutely had to go perfectly if I wanted to get adopted. My stomach felt like it was filled with balloons, all zipping around, releasing their air. Fingers shaking with nervousness made clipping a bow into my sometimes unruly orange-red hair quite a difficult task. Oh, why won't my heart listen when I tell it to calm down? Hey, think you'll get picked today? A girl my age named Nellie got my attention. I sure hope so, I responded with some reservation. How long's it been since you've been here? Well, my whole life, so 12 years, I guess. Another of my friends came and put her arm around my shoulders. You'll do fine. Just do everything like you practiced, and people will be fighting over who gets to take you home. I just nodded and hoped that I wouldn't screw anything up. That night was the music recital at the Brookside Girls' Home. The orphanage had a music program for the children living there, and they put on a recital each year. The event was open to the public. The idea was to give people the chance to see some of the talented children that lived at the orphanage, and potentially lead to more adoptions. I've seen lots of my friends and classmates adopted into good homes, but I was always passed over. Maybe I'm too weird, or too skinny, or maybe no one wants to adopt someone with freaky orange eyes like mine. Maybe I'm just not good enough for anyone. I've never been good enough at anything to enter the recital before, but this year I worked really hard to learn the violin. Most of the year since the last recital, my fingers were nearly bleeding from calluses, and my classmates' ears were nearly bleeding from the instrument's tortured squeals. But now I've gotten a lot better, and I have a chance to show that I am special. This is my chance to stand out. By the time evening fell in the Northern Michigan orphanage, the front room was packed with people from nearby homes. Mostly older couples, the audience looked eager for the performance to begin. The head of the girls' home stood up, facing the crowd in the heavily windowed room, and began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all coming tonight. I think you're all in for a real treat, but not the Rice Krispie kind. Ha ha ha! The audience chuckled politely at the pitiful attempt at humor, and waited for the woman to continue. My name is Ms. Hayes. I'm the head mistress here at Brookside, and I'll tell you that these girls are very talented. I'm sure that every one of you here will find exactly what you are looking for. Unless you're looking for a boy, then you'll be disappointed. The audience again acted amused to avoid the awkward silence that followed the joke. Well, without further ado, let's start the program. I sat in the front row of the room, third from the end. There were two girls performing before me, Amy and Nellie. The building felt really hot, as though we were all sitting in some kind of sauna or oven, wearing clothes that all would have been stifling, much less these stiff and uncomfortable dress clothes. Hopefully I won't be totally drenched in sweat by the time I went on stage. I took a quick look around, but no one else seemed to be suffering. Maybe it was just me. I'm weird. Amy played the theme from Star Wars on the clarinet, and Nellie played a simplified version of Sonatina in C by Clementi on the piano. I couldn't really pay attention. I was far too nervous. This was my chance to finally get noticed, and maybe even get a family of my own. Oh man, I'd better not screw up. My possible future parents could be out there watching. My life and future were in my hands. When my friends had finished performing, I slowly made my way up to the small folding platform that served as the stage for the orphanage. My spine felt like it was vibrating with apprehension. I held the violin in a death grip. Hopefully it wouldn't break in my hands. After I got onto the stage, I clamped my eyes shut. Ms. Hayes announced my performance and sat back down. I stood frozen for a few seconds, keeping my eyes closed. I was too terrified to even look out at the people. They'd probably be scared off if they saw my fiery irises before they saw that I had more to offer. I'm more than just a weirdo. I'd like to think so anyway. After the long pause, I lifted the instrument up into position and drew my bow across the strings. The very first note resounded with a beautiful tone that surprised even me as it filled the room. Without hesitating for too long, I continued playing my piece, Ode to Joy by Ludwig van Beethoven. It was one of my favorite songs, and I knew that I could perform it to the best of my ability. Throughout the piece, my eyes remained closed. I put as much passion and feeling into the music as I could. My body swayed back and forth, moving to the melody. My mind tried to focus on the song, but it would not cooperate. Although my eyes were shut tightly, I could see burning flames surrounding me, burning me, consuming everything. My body was getting even hotter, almost unbearably. It was all I could do to keep from crying out. I knew that yelling that I was burning up in pain would reveal what a weirdo I was, and decrease, if not completely obliterate, any chance I had of being adopted. When I was reaching the end of my performance, with only a few notes left, my eyes could stay closed no longer. It was as though the fire within them forced the lids open like the tide overwhelming a dam. They were glowing with bright orange intensity that I could even feel. It scared me, but I was too petrified to even move. At that instant, the sound of an explosion came from the kitchen, one room over. Several employees ran toward the noise, only to come dashing back out.
There's a fire! Somebody must have left the stove on! It's too big to fight! Everyone get outside! Run!
The confined fire in the kitchen soon grew into a raging inferno which engulfed the building. There was mass pandemonium as children, employees, and guests scrambled out of the orphanage into the cool September night. I couldn't move, frozen in place. How could this happen? I was so close to finally having a family. That was all I ever wanted. Why did the very universe seem determined to prevent me from being happy? I sank to my knees and looked up at the ceiling, sobbing and choking on tears. The flames had spread to all the walls of the front room. The blaze surrounded me, but I felt no heat coming from it. I felt nothing. Just when I was at the point of giving up, a figure walked through the raging fire. The flames seemed to part and allow the robed man to pass. My voice was lost in gasping breaths. I could not form words. Then I heard the newcomer speak.
We finally found you, Serafina.
Flame and Shadow, Chapter 2.
I wonder if I'll still be alive at the end of today. As I sprinted through the alleyways of Flint, Michigan, the outcome didn't seem too promising. Living on the streets of such a dangerous city, that question is always in the back of one's mind. But while running for my life, the sound of the enraged pursuers chasing me brought uncertainty to the answer. I'll admit, I probably deserve whatever's coming to me. I stole again. But what's a 12-year-old boy supposed to do? I'm hungry and thirsty, and the grocery bag that I clutched could have just what I needed to get me through the day. Or it could be filled with toilet paper like the last bag I jacked. I knew this area, and exactly where to avoid if I didn't want to get killed by the gangs. After running for several minutes, I looked back to see if my pursuer was still behind me. A piece of wood that had been left lying in the dim alley caught my foot. With a stumble, I skidded to the ground. The person I had robbed was quickly on top of me. He ripped the bag away and pounded me with his fists.
You little brat! You're gonna pay for messing with me, you good-for-nothing piece of crap!
Stop! Please stop! I begged for mercy. I promise I won't do it again. Please! The man stood up and gave one last warning before walking away.
Yeah, you'd better not. You won't be so lucky next time.
I scrambled to my feet as fast as I could and hobbled in the opposite direction. My legs hurt from the fall, and my head and chest hurt from the beating I'd received. Both knees were leaking blood, and I tried to hold back tears as I limped. Eventually, I leaned up the side of a subway and sank down to the ground. The manager had told me to scram many times, but I didn't care. Maybe someone would throw me some bread they didn't want. People are always complaining that there's too much bread in their subs. However bad it got, I would never regret running away from the boys' home where I'd spent the first 10 years of my life. The owner, Samir Rice, physically abused a bunch of my classmates. I found out that I could be next. There was no way I would stay and live in that oppression for another day. It didn't matter where I went, I just had to get out. I ran away and have been on the streets ever since. The boys' home was just outside of Flint on the east side, so I make sure to avoid the east as much as possible. I've barely survived the last 2 years by begging and stealing for every scrap of food and drop of water I could get, but I would keep fighting to live, no matter what. My steel-gray eyes watched evening fall quickly, and I shivered as the darkness and the cold set in. My stomach growled. It had not been a successful day. Not one person had even looked my way. I stood up. It was super important that I didn't let the gangs find me. Then they would just use me as bait for a trap to get what they wanted. I've seen it happen before. Just as I began to find my way to some shelter, something caught my attention. A tall figure had stopped just outside the alley. The shape was a man wearing a long trench coat and a bandana. He had not seen me in the dark passage and was looking in the opposite direction. This could be my chance to turn today into a victory. Silently, I made my way to the edge of the buildings, praying that the shadows would conceal me for just a few more seconds. Very slowly and carefully, my hand made its way into the man's large pocket. Just as my fingers touched what could have been his wallet, a strong grip clamped around my arm. My heart jumped and I tried to jerk away. The man's hands were really strong and I couldn't break free. My head tilted up to look at him and found him looking down at me with an expression of wonder. "No, it couldn't be," he expressed his disbelief. I took advantage of the hesitation to punch him in the stomach as hard as I could with my free hand. The strike sent the tall fellow flying backward several feet. I froze and stared down at my still extended fist. What just happened? I've never really been exceptionally strong. Actually, I was quite weak. How did I do that? My eyes looked up at the man I had just punched. He was down on one knee, looking back at me, and he was smiling. Uh-oh. I began backing away slowly. This could be bad. Not again. I couldn't take being beaten twice in the same day. The man stood up and called to me.
"Don't run away! Come here! I think I know you!"
That wouldn't work on me. I turned and dashed into the dark alleyway, with him calling for me to stop behind me. I ran as fast as I could go, cutting in and out of walkways, and making many sudden turns to lose him. Eventually, I slowed, gasping for breath, but there was no sound of footsteps or voices. I lost him. And myself. I was so concerned with escaping, I ended up in a part of the city where I'd never been. After looking around for a moment, I picked a direction and started walking. It was late, and I needed to find a place to stay as soon as possible. When I turned a corner, I was suddenly grabbed and thrown to the ground. The air was knocked from my lungs, and only a small cry came from my mouth. Lying on my back, I looked up at the silhouette of a person, illuminated by a single overhead lamp.
"You little creep! I knew I'd find you someday!"
With a feeling of horror, I recognized the voice. It was Samir Rice. He was pointing a gun at my head.
"I was such a nice guy. I gave you a home. I gave you food. And what did you do? You spat in my face. You rejected every kind thing I did for you, you brat!"
He started kicking me in the ribs. I cried out in pain, but he continued.
"You're no good to anybody. You're better off dead. I think my good deed for the day would be to get rid of you and make the world just a little bit better."
Rice was suddenly cut off as he was forcibly thrown against a wall. Dazed, he pointed his gun at the attacker.
"What the hell? Mind your own business."
"He is my business."
My savior was the man in the trench coat from earlier. I was too hurt to move and could only watch from the cold ground.
"How about you just move along, or I'll kill you too,"
Rice growled. With a lightning-fast move, the stranger grabbed the gun with his right hand, struck Rice's arm, kicked out his leg, and forced him to the ground. He pressed the pistol, still in Rice's grasp, into his side.
"Drop the gun."
Rice whimpered.
"Are you crazy? What the hell, man? I'll call the cops."
"Drop the gun."
The man's fingers tightened on the trigger. Rice complied, and his assailant took the gun and released him. Without a repeatable word, my old headmaster ran away into the night. The man in the trench coat walked over to me and offered his hand. "Are you okay?" I nodded, clenching back tears. He picked me up in his arms and began to carry me out of the alley.
"We've been looking for you, Milo."